I'm Monica Miller, and I am an associate professor of English and Africana Studies here at Barnard. I grew up in southeastern Connecticut in a small town named Norwich, which is near New London. My family's actually been in that area for many hundreds of years. A term that I've coined is a group of New England Creoles. For us, the New England Creole is African American, Native American, and Portuguese. I was taking a class with Cornell West at Harvard on the souls of black folk, doing just a full reading of W.E.B. Du Bois's classic text, and came across a footnote that indicated that Du Bois had been caricatured as a dandy in the press. He was not being lauded for his fashion, but he was being derided for over-attention to dress and fashion. I wrote my dissertation on black dandyism. In terms of helping people to understand the importance of it historically, one of the things that happens to Africans as they're transported through the Middle Passage, right, from Africa to the US, and as their lives are transformed in that process, their clothes are taken away. And they're given a kind of standard issue, usually very rough fabric clothing. Their identity, right, is being changed via the change of their clothes. Immediately, people try to rehumanize themselves, distinguish themselves as individuals, right, rather than part of this kind of black laboring mass that people are exploiting. They do that historically, and there are documented records of this, by trying to modify their clothing. By, for example, putting a button, sewing a button onto this standard issue clothing. My dissertation really ended with the Harlem Renaissance, and one of the things I wanted to do with my book was to really think about black dandyism as a kind of image-making practice or performative practice. There were artists living in the city who were kind of living and working as black dandies and really thinking through a lot of the issues that had come up in my book and that I wanted to expand my book into. They were doing this in their work, so it was a kind of laboratory for me at the time. The man who's on the cover of my book, the artist Ike Ude, who works downtown, he was one of the people that I first kind of happened upon when I moved here to New York, his work. And then a really important part of the way that I think about Afro-cosmopolitanism as it is imaged through the practice of dandyism. I was also really excited about the opportunity to teach at a women's college. And especially as my work was developing, it was very clear to me that questions of gender and sexuality, if you're talking about dandies, are really primary and formative. My students are always pushing my work because they're always asking me questions about the present. And the work that I've done with my book on black dandyism was deeply archival, but they ask me questions that are about things that are happening right now. I have, in recent years, really built up a kind of research profile that also includes very contemporary black popular culture, thinking about the fashion choices of people like, for example, Kanye West. They bring me things that they're really interested in, and then I say, okay, well, let me figure out the history of that particular thing. Dandies are figures who are playing with clothing, they're playing with performativity, they're playing with their identity. They are doing so in order to become creatures that are transformative, right, and that can cross boundaries. Dandies who are black actually question, right, your expectations about what blackness looks like, right, and what it can look like, and how it can be transformed through props and performances. And especially when they're racialized, then they call into question a whole set of categories of identity that we take for granted, but that are always in process and in motion.